Thank you all for being here. Today we'll be discussing the topic automation secrets every lawyer must know in 2024. My name is Brittany Hernandez, and I am a lawyer licensed in California and the head of legal innovation at Gavel. Gavel is a document automation platform for lawyers that serves as the automation infrastructure for the modern scalable law practice. I'm joined today by Tom Barr. Tom obtained a Bachelor of Laws from the University of Leeds and is the co-founder and managing director of NodeMasters. NodeMasters provides external expertise and resources for delivering tech projects for legal and compliance professionals. Prior to NodeMasters, Tom spent several years working in innovation teams at global law firms on document automation projects. So thank you so much for joining me today, Tom.
No, thanks for having me, Brittany. Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. So for our agenda today, Tom will speak first and share NodeMasters' 7 automation secrets for law firms and why it's crucial to adopt in 2024. Then I will cover Gavel's 7 additional automation secrets every lawyer must know. We'll leave 10 minutes at the end for questions, so feel free to post your questions in the chat as you think of them. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to you, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Perfect. Hopefully you can see my screen and the presentation.
Yes.
And let me know if not. So yeah, let's go over kind of the 7 kind of key secrets and from the approach of how to approach document automation, more the theory around document automation and how we can extract the most in terms of getting started and then increasing our return on investment in approaching it as well. So probably the first question we're probably all asking ourselves in terms of looking at any technology, looking at any kind of process innovation is why in the first place. And so like most technologies, document automation, process automation, one of the really big points there is around the time and efficiency savings that can be provided from it. In the law firms what I've worked at, kind of spearheading, kind of rolling out internal templates for document automation, we were often targeting kind of over 80% in time savings, and that was measured by kind of anecdotal feedback from lawyers. How long would it take you to automate a document beforehand, kind of draft that manually, and then how long it would take with automation and just filling in the questionnaire in a tool such as Gavel and measuring it that way. So off the bat, there's really big time and efficiency savings to be had, and that's obviously the main kind of driver, the main kind of metric in terms of ROI. But I think a really key point around automation and kind of brings us on to the first of our kind of secrets today is actually around kind of more some fringe benefits, some secondary benefits that automation can bring as well. So whilst it's easy to kind of be very focused around the ROI, the efficiency drivers, it's important not to actually lose sight of actually more of the qualitative benefits from automation. And so the first point is around actually consistency. Now, the next kind of slide, this screenshot, may be a familiar sight to all of us. You need to generate a contract, an agreement, and clearly it's not the first time that your team, your organization has done that agreement. So you go into a shared drive, a shared folder, be it SharePoint, be it wherever, and try and find, okay, what's that template I was looking for? And you're probably met by a site not familiar to this. There's multiple versions. Some are kind of maybe worded quite weirdly. People are overwriting different ones. Perhaps there's actually ones, kind of previous examples that have been done for previous clients as well. And so looking at that, it's quite hard to actually know what's the single source of truth, what's the latest, the greatest, the most consistent, the most standardized version of the template that sits within our organization. And so by virtue of just having a process of document automated, having that creates that single source of truth there. You're accessing it kind of on a system such as Gavel, that document, that template, and straight away everybody's using that single template there. It's driving away all this inconsistency. So by getting to everyone to adopt automation and automated practices, that's an instant benefit there. And why is that so important? Well, why could it be dangerous to use kind of a different template per person or a situation such as this? Well, of course, in addition to the template they're using maybe not being the most up to date as well, any kind of errors that they've made or any kind of changes perhaps we made for a specific client, those are going to be compounded every single time that's being used. It's going to go further and further away from that single source of truth. So by using automation, by actually getting your entire kind of organization in some cases, following a single source of truth, that single template, that single process, we're getting that massive benefit of consistency. It's something that really can't be underestimated, because I feel this is actually quite a hidden problem, really. It's clearly not going to be the top of anyone's agenda, but actually if we start to think about kind of the loss of time in terms of everybody having to drag out different templates and so on, it can really kind of add up and compound quite quickly. The second kind of secret to dive into is actually kind of following on from that, and another secondary benefit of document automation, and that's actually around document automation and different tools' ability to actually offer more than just the output, the automated document, as a benefit to users. So it offers the ability to educate users and to therefore minimize risk as we go through, because the user goes through the tool, they fill in a questionnaire, and actually as automators, as legal engineers, we have the ability to actually shape that. We've got the ability in tools such as Gavel to provide guidance around questions, and to actually, via the framing of the questions themselves, actually make sure that any checks and balances, any points in the process that the user needs to actively consider, are actually explicitly being kind of gone through and answered by the user. So kind of what's an example of that? Well, let's take a look. Here's a question that I may need to ask in a automated NDA template to control some conditional content for the user. So is this NDA an exemption to the company confidentiality policy? Yes or no? Now that yes or no question is going to get the logic that I need for the template that I've automated to control certain content in it. I've technically fulfilled what I need to automate the document, but perhaps that isn't actually worded in the best way for the user. They're maybe not clear on exactly what I'm referring to, or exactly kind of the consequences of this question. So when we're composing our document templates in a tool such as Gavel, we can actually spend a bit more kind of care and time around questions such as these. So here, what I've done is I've actually asked the same question, but I'm asking it in a really different way that's hopefully a much more clear to the user and gets them to explicitly consider the point. So this is obviously just kind of a theoretical example, but here we're setting out now what we mean by the confidentiality policy in more detail. We're explaining kind of why and why there would be an exception in this case to the process. And now we're getting the user to very kind of explicitly mark one option or the other, rather than necessarily a yes or no. It's always tempting when automating to include yes/no questions, but actually in some cases our brain doesn't always think that way, and to get to use actually kind of more explicit answers allows the user to actually fully consider their answer. So by going through this process, not only is the user getting what they needed, kind of that NDA automated, but they're also having the relevant policies, the relevant steps, the relevant consideration points kind of explained to them as they go as well, and therefore kind of educating them at the same time. And this means that we can actually extend the scope of actually what we intend to do with automation, because in the case of where perhaps actually we may just want to automate something within our own team just to save the team time. Well, actually, if we've got guardrails on and we're really clearly explaining the underlying process, that actually means that we can make these tools available to the rest of our organization, or even directly to our clients in some cases, to go through, because by this guidance, by this education, they're actually getting the underlying process, the underlying consideration points explained to them at the same time. So definitely those 2 points there, I think, really interesting to think around, how document automation in general can provide much more than just those kind of headline time and efficiency savings there. But where to start with automation? What do we automate first? Let's say that we've done our research, we've done our shopping, we've got a tool such as Gavel in place, so we know we have the technical capabilities available to us to go and automate all of our underlying processes, all of our document templates, But it's classic kind of needle in the haystack, kind of child in the candy store, kind of a dilemma there. Where do we start? Around that, there's probably a few kind of key points to consider. Probably my next secret in this topic is probably the most single important one of all. We at NodeMasters have done kind of a number of blog articles, other kind of webinars and talks around kind of some of the potential kind of pitfalls and things to watch out for in automation. And this is probably the single biggest point that we'll happily kind of shout from the rooftops all day. And that's in kind of any automated process, the output's only ever going to be as good as the input. And that's really true, particularly of document automation and document templates is as well, because it's easy when you're kind of staring at a list, at a shared drive of your organization's documents and templates, to imagine that everything's kind of kind of drafted and marked out and marked up exactly as it should be. And all you need to do now is to get it into some software, start putting placeholders in, and then you're good to go, and everyone can start doing them quicker and easier. And that would be absolutely amazing in a perfect world. But actually, just taking something as a candidate for automation starts to raise kind of questions that perhaps actually the document owners haven't considered before. As mentioned before by Brittany, I've worked in a couple of law firms around their document automation programs. One law firm actually, as they were starting out and automating their very first document templates, and we had this exact dilemma internally. Where do we start? And we were told, well, we've got a great knowledge team, great knowledge lawyers. Here's a whole kind of bank of precedents. Just go kind of take your pick. So we started looking at them. We started kind of having a go at perhaps automating some of them, and then we immediately started kind of asking questions to the knowledge lawyers in this case around, okay, what happens in this scenario, and how do we kind of determine this, and so on. And those questions naturally led them to then actually consider kind of some of just the legal drafting points further. But it quickly became apparent that actually perhaps as a result of kind of that and that kind of inquisitive look, not everything was as actually fully kind of drafted as a candidate for automation as perhaps first anticipated. So that left us with the dilemma then of, okay, well, what can we automate then if it turns out a lot of these kind of larger precedents actually need a bit more time, a bit more consideration? Where can we actually begin to look? And so that kind of leads me on to my next point there, and that's really to start small and kind of grow from there. So what makes kind of a good candidate for those kind of very first kind of documents and processes that you'll automate? And as I mentioned, think small, but also actually think around the underlying usage as well of different documents and templates. So definitely what we started to do then in this scenario at the law firm that I work for as we're rolling out document automation. We went around kind of the different practice areas, the different lawyers within them, and actually understood, okay, what documents are you drafting the most? We didn't think about it from a perspective of those key transactions or those key agreements. We just wanted to know in terms of where lawyers were spending their time. And it turned out actually that something that was very common, particularly in some of the larger practice areas there, such as real estate, was okay, different transactions, different matters may result in quite different in terms of those big kind of headline agreements. But actually, the one consistency running through an awful lot of them was the auxiliary, the supplemental documents. They always need to be done in those sort of transactions, and particularly from a perspective of automation. They all had standardized formats. A lot of them are actually prescribed in certain formats based on the relevant law as well. So we were looking at kind of standard notices, different kind of key licenses in the case of real estate as well. And basically those are the very first documents we automated, and that they probably weren't the single best kind of use case or selling point for document automation. They were very simple. You could automate them both from the template in kind of an afternoon, and it would only take lawyers kind of a couple of minutes to automate. But actually everybody needed those, as I said, for their transactions. So it got people using the system really, really quickly, and it got kind of multiple users, lots of individual users of the system. really quickly as well. And from there, we had then an audience and some data and some information to then actually guide how we expanded and what we automated next. And we actually ended up doing quite a few real estate documents as a result, building up to those bigger agreements, of course, delivering kind of more ROI as we went. But by starting small, we gained instant kind of traction amongst our user base, and as well, we managed to actually see what would be the most popular out there as well. Definitely some other kind of key practice areas which benefit a lot, particularly to start off with, and as an extension to those kind of supplemental documents, is kind of forms as well. So for registry bodies, such as the land registry in the UK, also courts as well. These are definitely great candidates to begin to automate, because the great thing about forms as well is it's actually even easier to automate, because the form actually guides you in terms of which questions are being asked. So you can just effectively replicate those in your tool. But the real benefit there is, once again, kind of that single source of truth, that standardization that I mentioned as well, the additional guidance and education that I mentioned before, and getting that traction too. And the great thing about tools such as Gavel and recent advancements as well is that kind of no forms off limits. A real sticking point for several years ago when I was working at these law firms, where, okay, we've got actually a number of forms you can automate, but we only have the templates available in PDF. Those are the only formats that are made available to us. Well, now Gavel has the ability to actually automate PDF forms. So even if you're only starting with a PDF in terms of source material, that's now able to be automated, which is, of course, super exciting. So in terms of that, where to start, think around volume, think around kind of those standard formats, those ones that don't need that additional consideration to begin to drafting, and think around kind of those forms as well. There's always more than you initially think and expect. That's because nobody sits there kind of shouting around the fact that they're filling in these simple documents. So definitely working with teams, kind of digging under the hood slightly and finding these use cases, you'll build up actually quite a strong pipeline very quickly as a result. And moving on then, if we move forward, I want to really kind of dispel a myth now. I'm sure kind of anyone that's worked with lawyers and in automation has probably heard this before. Okay, this technology you've got is great. I can see the potential for some teams, but you know what? My work, kind of my practice area, my team, you know, all the matters, all the transactions, they're just too bespoke to be automated. Every single one is different, and that may be true. I'd argue perhaps maybe to a lesser extent than the lawyer in that case considers, but yet no doubt some semblance of truth there. There's always going to have to be a degree of manual drafting, of negotiation and back and forth, particularly with larger agreements. Perhaps it is slightly unrealistic to expect that a lawyer just completes a questionnaire once and there's 120 pages, you know, ready to go straight for signature. But that's not to say that automation can't play a role in those sort of kind of practice areas and those sort of examples as well. And definitely kind of a really powerful secret I'd like to offer up around that then is, in those sort of cases, when we're kind of, you know, we're faced with a really large agreement, something that would, you know, kind of unprecedented amounts of detail in, and perhaps there's kind of operational challenges around, it's likely never to be fully automated anyway. Well, we don't have to automate all of it. I think the 80-20 principle, you know, the concept around actually just 20% of effort gets us 80% of the results, the output. That is so true in document automation, and particularly for larger agreements as well. Okay, you know, 100 pages, you know, dozens and dozens of clauses, you know, lots of really complex and technical areas of the law there. Okay, we don't need to automate every single square bracket. However, let's take a step back. There's going to be thousands of square brackets across the document. And actually, and here's kind of a little technical tip. What I often do when I get a document template through to automate is I just do a search for kind of a open square bracket. And then I use the number as a very rough approximation of how complex it would be to automate. But then I also just begin to kind of flick through all of those square brackets and see, okay, what actually are these placeholders? What needs to be automated here? And very quickly in some large documents, I established, well, okay, hang on, this kind of, you know, 100-page kind of, you know, master lease agreement for our law firm, okay, very complicated, but you know what? A couple of hundred of these square brackets are just around freehold/leasehold. Well, I could automate that really, really quickly, and that could actually save a lawyer probably well over an hour's amount of time just answering that one question. And there's going to be less chance of them making a mistake doing so. Likewise as well, kind of a loan agreement, similar kind of length that I looked at once. And there's provisions for whether that it was dealing with one loan or multiple loans. And that's basically just square brackets and then an S to pluralize a lot of different words, agreements. Once again, one question there could actually automate the document in hundreds of places, save the lawyer a lot of time, drive that consistency, the risk mitigation as well. Employment contracts, obviously kind of gendered language, pronouns, he, she, or they. One question there would actually output that in multiple places of the document. And they're really simplistic examples. There's other ones as well where, okay, maybe you're just asking a handful of questions, but you are getting to that 80% of the document, of the effort automated there. There's lots that you can do there. And that's on top of kind of the obvious candidates for automation, party details, those kind of key, kind of heads of terms as well. So I would definitely urge anyone, when you're hearing kind of that rebuttal around, oh, you couldn't possibly kind of automate this, just actually take a look at it and identify, okay, how many of these square brackets are actually similar and could be answered by the one single question there. How many of these are the party name being repeated, and obviously we just have that one placeholder and it goes into all of these places in the document. And actually you'd get to that 80% mark really, really quickly with just a handful of questions there. And then you're saving lawyers an awful amount of time, single source of truth, driving that consistency, providing the education where necessary, all those points that I've just made really, really quickly. And of course, over time, you can automate perhaps the more complex parts of the document. There's no need to ever kind of stop in document automation. There's always more that can be done, but you can get to that 80% really, really quickly. And I definitely encourage you to kind of challenge that mantra if you ever come across it as well. Definitely everything can be automated to an extent. So I definitely encourage that. So we've covered off kind of two key topics so far. One of the benefits of automation, how do we get started? How can we find and those initial templates and address some of those key challenges? I like to kind of almost kind of jump now to perhaps kind of the next stage as well. And that's you've begun your automation journey, documents are being automated, you're seeing those efficiency gains. Well, the key now is to capitalize on it. I think that's the great thing about automation tools such as Gavel. They've got kind of almost infinite potential. Once you procure them, once you've got the license, you've started to use them, then you can continue to just develop and grow and refine kind of everything that you've automated. And there's ways as well to kind of really exponentially deliver and maximize ROI within these tools as well. And so another secret is, well, automate multiple documents at once. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's kind of take an example. It's quite easy to think around automation tools as being kind of very linear, or where the output kind of directly equals the input. So we all know that automation tools, such as Gavel, the user fills in a questionnaire, they answer questions, and then something's outputted, often an automated document template. And so we could obviously automate, say, a client onboarding letter and make that a questionnaire available publicly to our clients. So it's a really nice experience for them. They fill in that online questionnaire, provide all that information, and then we get what we need, that outputted kind of letter, available to us directly. And obviously in tools such as Gavel, it can go straight to e-signature as well. So that's quite nice in itself, what I've just described there. The user fills in a questionnaire and one document is outputted, but it doesn't have to end there. And Gavel and tools generally, they can output multiple documents at once. So actually, instead of thinking around one questionnaire equals one document, that doesn't have to be the case at all. I spoke earlier around kind of these ancillary documents we were doing for real estate transactions. Well, that was all one questionnaire that produced 4 or 5 different documents, all around a single transaction. And it's similar here. So our client, our new client can fill in that questionnaire online with all of their their kind of company and organizational details. And from that, we can produce our client onboarding letter. But actually, we're of course able to produce kind of a DPA, an NDA with all of the details filled in, our standard terms, conditions, and so on. So definitely always thinking around kind of approaching anything. Perhaps stakeholders will come to you in terms of just thinking around kind of one single document, one single output. But we all know kind of tools are more capable than that. So always thinking around what are those smaller parts, those more ancillary parts of the process that can be automated as well. Often these kind of quick wins, there's an extra template available. We've obviously asked a lot of the information already. Let's automate it at the same time, and really get that benefit there as a result. So that goes from then in terms of that kind of ROI and time saving, from saving kind of people 5 or 10 minutes. We're timesing that in many cases by the number of documents. So we're going to a half an hour, 40-minute saving really, really quickly, and no extra effort from the end user because they're still just filling in that one questionnaire. And then that leads me to kind of my final secret before I hand back over to Brittany, and we'll have a look at things from a more technical perspective in Gavel. And that's actually, there's no need to stop at what I just described in terms of, one questionnaire equals multiple documents. That kind of exponential kind of ROI and time saving, you can increase that further. So one project that I worked on at a large UK law firm was actually around kind of bulk automation. This was a number of years ago, and our real estate team was working for a client in terms of residential property sales, and sort of a number of different developments. Each of those developments had between 50 and 100 properties, and they were producing documentation for each sale, probably about 4 or 5 documents for each transaction. And so what was made available to us as the law firm was actually some structured data, a spreadsheet of the different purchases, the property address, the price, other key terms, and so on. So we had this structured data, and the task to the law firm was to produce basically hundreds of documents reflecting that. So obviously automation and technology was a prime candidate for that, particularly in the context of work like that. Very commonly in law these days, is done at a fixed fee. We bid a fixed price to win that work in the first place. So the onus is on the law firm actually to deliver that in the most efficient way possible, to provide a good margin on that internally. And so what we did at the time, because this was a number of years ago, we didn't have a tool such as Gavel back then, is actually we built kind of a custom tool that actually extracted that spreadsheet as comma separated values, and that was fed into an automation tool using its API. And what we were able to do then is take that table of structured data and run it through kind of that automation engine, so to speak, and have hundreds of documents output. So for each line of data, one transaction, one property, we were getting 4 or 5 documents, times that by the number of documents in the spreadsheet, the number of ones in the development. There, as you can see, it gets exponential really, really quickly. And the great thing is, jump forward a few years to today, we've got tools like Gavel. It has obviously repeating items built in, so you can have multiple of a single concept. It has features like the Gavel Data Manager, so you'll be able to work with kind of the structured data within the tool, and you can do functionality like this out of the box. So even where there's a bespoke project where we're not going to use this development agreements again, we're not going to kind of do the same for this client, it's still worth actually putting in that investment into document automation, because just from one project alone, that wouldn't necessarily be reused or repeated. Well, we were saving 15 minutes per document, and then we times that by 5 documents per purchase, and then we times that by the number of matters, the number of purchase, number of properties per project, and then we actually did a number of them for the same client. Well, you go from the idea of saving 15 minutes, a go at document automation, to, in this case, hundreds of hours, dozens of working days in this place. You can imagine what that led to in terms of efficiency savings for the law firm in that case. So that's kind of a more extreme example. I'm not saying that obviously every project and opportunity is going to offer that, but just by thinking in that way around, document automation is this tool we have, and where the circumstances allow, where there's that standardization, where there's that structured data, we can really use it to exponential gains there. And I definitely always keep an ear out, definitely work with your colleagues and different teams to understand kind of what opportunities are there such as that, and explore obviously using automation as a candidate to get that work done there. Perfect. I think that's everything from my side then. Hopefully those points were really useful. And I'll hand the floor back to Brittany now.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. It was great to see, your different secrets and to hear NodeMasters' specific approach to thinking about how we automate documents for different firms. I wanted to address something the last point kind of brought up for, when somebody who's a partner at a firm looks and see all these time savings, they're thinking that's 300 hours I'm not billing. But at the same time, it's not billable time anyway. It's just sort of putting in entries of time, so we can actually repurpose that time to gain billable hours if you're still using that model. And a lot of firms now are actually moving towards flat fee, subscription, one time, all sorts of different models that we're seeing in the market now. So I just wanted to address that since it came up on that last slide of what do we do with all these hours that we have now? We can get more clients, we can build more clients, or we can use different models that allow us to utilize that time in a different way other than data entry. And so I'm just going to go into some of our Gavel secrets now. So I'm terming this the Gavel 7, but we talked about Gavel, but I haven't really gone into what it is. So it is a platform that allows you to do everything that Tom was kind of describing there, which is take your legal templates and turn them into questionnaire type of style format that you can interact with, add logic to the different questions, add logic to your documents to say, for example, only show this clause in this document when the person is located in the United States and they have a spouse and they have more than 2 children. And you can you can have all of these different conditions. And Gavel is a tool that allows lawyers to automate those documents and interact with the data by pushing information from one workflow into another, having emails automatically trigger at the end of workflows so that you can have documents automatically sent to the lawyer or sent to the client. These tools can also, the workflows that you build can also be used 100% internally, or they can be used partially internally and partially client facing, such as you send the link to the workflow to a new client and they fill out some information before your initial consultation or after that, so that they're entering their own information and you're just collecting that information to be repurposed or reused in your data or document generation process. So this is a little sheet that has lots of different things on it, but it's just to help guide us through the conversation around the 7 secrets that I'm going to share now. The first being around this idea of journey mapping. And the second line here is around key questions we want to think about for each of these different secrets. So we have things like journey mapping, data repurposing, conditional logic, repeating items, document tagging, customization, and productization, each tied to one of these key questions. So under this secret around journey mapping, we're talking about the fact that we are actually optimizing both for that firm's internal process and the client's journey simultaneously. So the key question here is, what am I optimizing for? So the idea here is when you have a Gavel account, it looks like this. And I want to show you what it looks like in context if you were having that situation where the client actually fills in information for you, and how we can really combine lots of different elements together. So when you create a workflow or a questionnaire in Gavel, let's say you wanted to embed it on your website, you could do that. Or like I said, you could use it internally. In this example, we have a firm that is specializing in US veteran law, and they have a lead magnet or a qualifying lead magnet that makes it to where people who come to this particular blog post are able to interact with a Gavel questionnaire or workflow that asks them a series of questions so that we can determine whether this person might be eligible for a grant. And there are a couple of key questions here around whether they have a qualifying service disability, so qualifying service connected disability, whether they own or will own the home, and whether they're going to be using the grant money to buy, build, or change their permanent home. And if they answer none of the above, then they don't meet one of the three criteria. So they're actually going to get sent all the way to the end of this workflow and be emailed, and also see here the outcome that they're likely not eligible. And there's a reason why. So we can see that this document was generated for this person in a flash, and it was also directly emailed to them right away to tell them you're likely not eligible. And they have a message here that says, "Hi, Mary." It's all customized for them. Click here, you can add different links and so on immediately after taking this workflow. They are nicely formatted with the information they entered. And we have a certain answer. The answer says, based on your answers, you may not be eligible for this type of grant. To be eligible, you need to have one of these, including these. You indicated that you have none. Now, let's say that the person who is answering this actually does have a service-connected disability. Then we get to see an instance of page logic happening here on the back end, where in the initial example, they were taken past this page because they answered none of the above. Now, because they answered that they have a service-connected disability, the person who's taking this is actually able to see the next two questions around information about their home. So they can answer questions such as, will you be using the grant money to buy, build, or change your permanent home? And do you own or will you own the home? So if they say no, then we're going to see an instance of question logic. So from the client's experience, they're only answering questions that are relevant based on their previous answers. So we're not having them answer a bunch of questions that are irrelevant and wasting their time. So we're simultaneously optimizing that client's experience with us, making us look very relevant and specific about what their scenario is and personalized to them. And each person feels that way at the end of the day, especially too with receiving emails with their personalized information, with their personalized answers. So you're able to customize this experience for them. So if they say yes and no, for example, they're going to have a different outcome for the reason. They're still likely not eligible, but the reason will be different, right? So when we talked about, or when Tom talked about, the different things that you would put into your document and how you would add different logic to them, this is what that looks like now. We don't have the bullet points anymore. And instead, we still have may not be eligible, but now we see the reason that is that you need to be using the grant money for this reason, and you need to be in a position where you're going to own or will own the home in the future. You might be able to apply for other grants, but not this one. Now, finally, when somebody answers all of the questions in the way that they would need to in order to qualify, such as yes and yes, they're going to get a different outcome. And this time we'll see in the document that it says, congrats, you may be eligible. We're happy to help you with that. Here's a way to schedule a consultation with us. So now we see, based on your answers, you may be eligible. We'd love to meet with you. You book an initial consultation with us. So there's a couple of things that are happening at the same time here from the user journey's perspective, as well as our internal journey going to and speaking to that journey mapping point. The customer or the potential client was attracted to your website specifically because you have information about what they've been searching for or they're interested in learning about. You have a way for them to quickly and easily find out whether or not they may or may not be eligible for this type of grant. And we're also simultaneously qualifying that lead for ourselves to only have people filtered through to booking a consultation with us who we could actually help apply for this type of grant. Also, what's happening is with that point Tom made around the data manager is we're collecting this information in the data manager, their answers to this question, so we can see all of their answers and reuse or repurpose, which is going to be our next secret here, information that we can push from one workflow into another for things that map over or are the same, such as the person's name, email, address. So we're not going through an 80-page document and typing out that person's name. And like Tom said as well, reducing the chance or minimizing the risk of error as well. So what we can do here is go into that second point or secret that we want to point out here around data repurposing. So this is the key question of, can I reuse data that I already have? And so the secret here being that we can repurpose data we collect in Gavel or that we already have stored in a third-party system. So with the example that we just had for the eligibility letter, what we can do is we can click on this session for the person that we want to reuse that information for. We can push that information to a next workflow, such as this limited scope engagement agreement. Because in this flow or journey, the person has come to our website, they've interacted with something that we have on there. We've decided that or determined that they may be a good candidate for us to work with. They've booked a consultation with us. We've had that consultation. We've done our conflicts checks. And now we're ready to engage them as a client. We just want to go ahead and reuse the information we already collected from their lead magnet information and push that into our engagement agreement. So then I, as a lawyer preparing this document for them, don't have to retype their information. I can just review it to make sure it's correct. And then I can add any different changes as needed. And then I just answer the questions that I don't have information for yet. This is an example of a repeating item. So I'm saying I'm including these two services, but I'm excluding these other services, such as this assistance with an appeal of a decision. And then I can go through. And as Tom said, because this is an engagement agreement, I can actually just automatically submit this for signing through our DocuSign integration. And I can also just review this first to make sure that it's formatted correctly as I want it to be. And this is our London firm in this example. Shout out for when I lived in London for a couple of years and where Tom lives as well. Or actually, you're not in London specifically, but in England. But either way, so you can see that Mary's information has pushed through here and has been formatted in multiple different ways, such as her full name, her last name only, and her prefix. You could actually add conditions around which lawyer's signature shows. So for example, if you wanted to choose in the workflow which attorney is working on this case, so it's personalized for that as well. If a paralegal, for example, is preparing this, we can go through and see that the bullet points for each of things that are included and not included. You could also add the compensation rates, and everything else that you would need is here as well. And then when we're ready, we can actually go ahead and submit that for signing. The other piece I was going to mention here around data repurposing is that idea that you might have information stored in a third-party system, such as Clio, for example, where you have your different matters. So if that's the case, you would just go into integrations and you would just link your Clio Manage account here. And then what you could do is have all of the fields available from matters and contacts in Clio and use those in Gavel. So you can also, if you were using a different tool outside of Clio, connect these together through Zapier, or some tools also have a direct integration as well in their platforms, such as Leadly and Decision Vault. And so with these tools, we can actually reuse and repurpose information that's stored either directly in Gavel or in other systems as well. So let's see what that would look like if you were using this example of a uniform statutory power of attorney. So let's go ahead and run this. So all I would need to do is search for the case or the person that we're preparing this, in this case, power of attorney for. And we're preparing this for Olivia Grace Lopez. We're going to continue. And in this case, I can see that she wanted to designate a single agent rather than multiple agents. And I can tell that because we have a field where Bella's information is getting pulled into this document or this workflow. We can see Bella and her mailing address have been pulled through from our data source. And then we can continue and we can answer any questions we don't have information for yet. So things like whether she wants to grant the agent power over all of the areas above, or just specific ones where I can check or uncheck different pieces of information. And then I can decide if I want to continue, have this power of attorney continue if she becomes incapacitated, or list any special instructions. So there's actually a lot of logic that's going on behind the scenes, but I'm not having to kind of delete whole pages or whole sections, and maybe I forget to erase a comma or delete a period or something. It's all happening in the background because I set this up, or NodeMasters set this up for me, from the beginning to be accurate. So in this case, what we can see is Olivia's information, and then also Bella's information. We can see which particular ones that she chose for her agent's powers. And also what's happening here is an entire section is not showing because she chose a single agent rather than multiple agents, because a whole other section would show for how the different agents would act separately or jointly, for example. So you can just kind of see how we are able to very quickly run through and draft different documents based on the different conditions that we set and repurpose different information using either Gavel information or information collected from Clio, for example, or some other tool. So for secret 3, this is going to be around conditional logic. So here the secret is that we can attach conditions to questions, pages, and variables, as you could see in the different examples within our workflows, as well as in our documents. So we kind of got to see a lot of that in the documents. We can show or hide different variables, different like answers, different clauses, different paragraphs, depending on the answers that were conditioned in the workflow itself. Repeating items, the secret here is that we can actually use the repeating item question type when collecting information about things like children, shareholders, heirs, creditors, anything where it could be 0 or it could be 100, it could be 20. We don't know in advance how many each person is going to have, and it varies between person to person. So it's unknown from the start, how many of something there will be. So a good example of something that Tom mentioned as well is that example of the ability to maximize ROI by actually, I'm going to just push this example actually, just so I can show you very quickly. There's I made like an Arkansas probate receipt of distribution workflow, and I'm just going to push the answers from a previous session because there's like multiple people, so I don't have to type it here, but we're going to push the information about different heirs, like John Doe, Marissa Jane, and Jerry Berry, and their different distribution amounts, to show you that if we wanted to, in this case, I'm just going to push it into another version of that same workflow, that you're able to, let's say you collected that information from a client intake questionnaire or some workflow that you sent to someone to say, who do you want to, now my internet's not working perfect. But you can say like, okay, so I gave my client, for example, a workflow that said, I want you to complete or designate all of the different heirs that you want to have, and their different distribution amounts for this. And then I can just take that information in workflow and push that through to automatically have those receipts of distribution prepared for each different person. And each of their respective receipts are going to have their individual information, such as their individual amounts that they're receiving or that they've received, and their name in the different sections that needs to appear. So that's how quickly, depending on how we have this set up, generate multiple documents with multiple different people's information using a single system, and just pushing information around or entering information once, depending on where it lives. So that's a really good example of how we can maximize our ROI from the tool itself by understanding how we can use it to its fullest potential. Let's talk a little bit about document tagging. So with document tagging, this is the idea that you actually create the workflow first, and then you're able to attach those different questions and variables and conditions and all those different things into your document. But I wanted to show you that you can do this with Word documents, PDF documents, or fillable PDF documents. You could have both be in the same workflow. But you can also use our AI feature called Blueprint to help you do this a lot faster. So let's say that you have a template that looks like this, where you have an anti-coercion insurance disclosure, and you just want to automate this document very quickly using Gavel. All you would need to do is say new workflow. And then you see that you have the option to start with questions, start with documents, or choose a pre-built workflow, where a pre-built workflow is one that Gavel has created for you. And we've had it reviewed by specialists in different practice areas and different jurisdictions, so that you don't have to build something that maybe other people use a lot as well, like standard court forms that aren't automated anywhere else. And you can use those for free, or you can have them added to your account. But for starting with documents, this is going to be that blueprint feature where all you need to do is take your document, your template, and drop it into the system here. And then when you say next, you're going to have a screen that looks like this, where it's just suggesting what the questions might be. And you can edit those and change if you want them to be a different variable type, such as number instead of text or date instead of text. You can change the variable name or the suggested question, or you can just approve or reject any that you'd like. What I want to point out here is it's recognizing the different places, the square brackets, kind of as Tom mentioned too, the different places where information entered would vary between person to person or matter to matter, so that the questions that are generated are able to help direct you to where the information should go. So we can see that it's suggesting what is the lender's name for the section called lender name. It's suggesting a variable name of lender name. For license, it's saying what's the license number. So you're not having to physically type these out. So it's helping you to generate this a lot faster. Same thing for things like borrower name and all these different questions here. You can also see that you're able to do this for a PDF document as well, if it has fillable fields. So it's going to look for things like the affiant name or the decedent's date of death or the county of death. You can do things for checkboxes, and it's really easy to kind of go through and change the questions or change the inputs and conditions as well. So that's how you're able to use AI to actually automate your documents a lot faster. And then when you're done and ready, you just say draft workflow, and that's going to put going to attach a document to that's workflow and put those variables into the document for you. So I can show you quickly what that would look like before we move on. So I'll say draft workflow. It's going to come up with all those questions similar to the example I showed you with the veterans disability. This is what the Gavel editor looks like, where you add questions, where you're able to move questions around, add new pages. And you're able to, so you wouldn't necessarily want, for example, all of these questions to be on a single page. Maybe you would put borrower information together, or you would put, different information that would live or naturally be grouped together. Or you could fix like this title for this document. You probably wouldn't want it to say page 1 demo. But I also wanted to show that the document has automatically been attached, and also the different variables that are associated with each question have already also been attached within or inserted into the document as well. So instead of those square brackets, now we have the appropriate syntax for curly bracket and curly bracket, and the variable name in between that, to make it to where when we run this, that information that's input from the question, so for what is the lender's name, will be input into that section within that document. So that's how quickly we're able to use something like Gavel Blueprint to automate our templates and documents, and how we tag our documents to the questions within the workflows. Secret number 6 is around customization. So the key question here is, can I make it match my brand? So the secret being that we can customize our workflow styles to match our brand for a consistent client experience. So if we refer back to, for example, the instance where we had an embedded workflow within our website, we want the colors to match and for the fonts to match. So instead of it being the default, where the default would just have, actually the default is not that example, but just where we had the workflow where all you'd see is the gavel at the top like this. So instead of having it look like this to the end user or the person who is our client, or to ourselves if we're using this internally, we can make it look very consistent with our brand. We can add our logo instead of Gavel's logo. We can take the headers off. And one way you can do that is by using something called the Gavel Custom CSS Generator, which is where you can just toggle on and off the things that you want or don't want. So if I say no header, the no header part goes, the header goes away. We can change the background color, probably not to black, but you can change anything that you want just by selecting on the side, giving it a name, and then saying deploy, and it will give you a link that you can put into the back end of workflow so that you can change that to look exactly how you'd like. Okay, so finally, for our last secret from Gavel is going to be around productization. So this is the question of what can I offer at scale? So the key being, or the secret being, that we can use these workflows that we've built 100% internally within the firm, as I mentioned, or we can realize the full potential of offering workflows at scale by creating legal products. So some examples of people who have done this, or lawyers who have done that, by creating separate, legal entities where they have their law firm and they have their legal tech business essentially that's built on Gavel. There are examples like Hello Divorce or DOS Docs, Cancel Your Docs. A2J Tech was a really interesting example in the access to justice space, where during COVID, they were able to create a form for tenants to apply for eviction relief. And they were able to serve 40,000 tenants in 2 months. So that's to show you the opportunity at scale to offer a client-facing workflow, whether it's free to be offered as a lead magnet, like in this especially adapted housing grant example, or for a fee, which in Counsel Your Docs case, it's more around creating a shareholder agreement for businesses in Ontario, and then being able to do that. I think it's $675. And since Gavel has a suite of productization tools, such as an integration with Stripe, you're able to add a paywall ahead or anywhere you choose along, let's say, before the documents are generated, within a workflow where the person who is filling out the information in the workflow would see that place where they need to pay before they're able to get access to the documents that are generated. So you could also make this a hybrid where, you have the documents generated, but then they're sent back to you. But I know we're actually at time. So if you want to send your questions to either of us, you can reach me at Brittany@gavel.io, and you can learn more and start a free trial of Gavel at gavel.io. Or you can reach Tom at contact@nodemasters.com and learn more at nodemasters.com as well. So thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate your time. Tom, thank you so much for being here as well. It was great to hear your secrets. Yeah, of course. So I'm going to go ahead and close us out so that everyone can get on to their next meetings. But thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.